everybody. This is Nick Hoff, and you're listening to the Matt Balaker podcast.
Hello, good people out there. Thank you once again for tuning in to the Matt Balaker podcast. I appreciate all your support, kind reviews, and subscriptions. If you haven't done so, please do it now. Today's guest continues our unplanned tradition of celebrating Nebraska residents. He's a nationally touring stand-up comedian who's been on MTV. He co-hosts a weekly show on SiriusXM. His debut album, Baby Daddy, hit #1 on the iTunes comedy charts. Impressive. And his new hour-long special, Front to Back, can be streamed on YouTube. Be sure to check it out. Now join me in welcoming Nick Hoff to the program. How you doing, Nick?
I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
I'm excited because it's been a while since we've connected. And I knew from like others, you're from Nebraska, and I didn't expect when I started this podcast a few months ago that I'd have so much fun talking to Cornhuskers. So where did you grow up in that great state?
You just did a complete creative shift. You're like, I'm going to do a podcast about everything I love, and then you're like, I just love Nebraska.
I didn't even know it. It was this latent love I had, Nick, and it's manifesting right now in my middle age.
I was listening to some of the past episodes. It's cool, you guys, that you have all these Nebraska people. I love Brad, known Brad for years. I grew up in a small town, Hastings, Nebraska, which is in South Central. And the only thing that came out of that, besides myself and famous football coach Tom Osborne, is Kool-Aid. Kool-Aid was invented in my town of 23,000.
If you have Kool-Aid, Tom Osborne, and Nick Hoff, that's a pretty impressive triumvirate. Like that's second to none. Like,
yeah, just shut down the city. It's done. You've peaked.
So Tom Osborne, is there anyone more important in Nebraska than him?
No, and I make a joke about it. So I went to Hastings High School, which is where he graduated high school, and up on these stairs, like the main landing of our school, you see these two giant pictures of him, one playing basketball and the other one him throwing a football. And I mean, he must have gone to high school in the 50s or something, and theirs are up there, and I just knew there's no surpassing that. Like, even if I cured cancer, they would not take his down and put I might get a plaque next to the Kool-Aid Museum.
Below the Kool-Aid, maybe there's a Tommy Frazier picture somewhere, and you're in the mix.
Yeah, I'm in the mix, but I'm not usurping the greatest college football coach of all time. So,
and then didn't he take office there? Like,
yes,
because he couldn't be anointed king. That was the next best thing. I understand.
Whatever he wanted, Nebraska would have put him in that position. They probably could have renamed the state at that moment.
I'm open to it. So we've known each other for a long time, but it's been a while since we reconnected, and I think we met initially. It might have been in Santa Monica. Maybe it was Nick Galvez's show. But what motivated you initially to move from Nebraska to Los Angeles?
So comedy was always on the mind ever since, I don't know, like mid 90s, watching Seinfeld in junior high and high school, and then finding out what he did for a living. I was like, yeah, that's it.
I want that on my job description, making hundreds of millions of dollars and telling jokes and making shows about nothing. That's a good way to live.
At that point, I didn't even know he was making good money from it. I just knew that's the first time I knew of a person that was their living. Like, even at a younger age, you'd watch Eddie Murphy or hear Bill Cosby or something. But you don't really think of that as a job. That's just some kind of crazy stratosphere that those guys were in.
They're just doing something. Yeah. Like, you don't think of it as a career.
On me. Yeah, it never dawned on me until you saw a guy that was just living in an apartment, and that's what he was doing. I was like, okay, that's what I want to do. And at that moment, my buddy Jeff Moores, who I been best friends with since 5th grade, he was real big on writing down your goals. He's like, if you write down your goals, you're X amount more likely to achieve them. And just on a lark, I wrote down, I'm going to be a stand-up comedian. I posted it on my corkboard in my room down in the basement. And like every time I came across a magazine that had a comedian in it, I'd like tape it up there next to that.
So
And
wait, you put this on your corkboard. How old were you approximately when you did this?
Probably ninth grade.
So this was like The Secret before The Secret.
Yeah, I don't think Oprah was nowhere near The Secret. It was my friend Jeff Morris who sniffed it out, and I wrote it down in like bubble letters. That was the most fancy letters that I could write.
The cheerleader scribe, I think.
Yes. And I posted it up there, and I thought, okay, well, if there's something to that, then that's what I want to be. And I put it up there, and it just kind of became a mantra. You know, I'd see it every morning and every night. And it just kind of became this like, yes, that's what I'm going to do. And even though I went to college and got a business degree, it was always, I'm going to do comedy when this charade is over.
So you never put make bigger dreams and put that on your corkboard?
No.
I don't think it gets much better. I mean, and if not that we need to get too serious, but I mean, it's probably up there in one of the most difficult professions to have. I mean, it's fairly easy to do. It's way more tough to make a living at. So if you're doing that, you know, you've hit something.
Absolutely. But ignorance is bliss when it comes to that, because I think the only competing job that I wanted was football player. And both of these seemed attainable.
So yeah, you're growing up in an era where Nebraska football was sort of at an apex. I mean, there are national championships, Heisman's seemingly every other year. And you had this strange, I mean, it's awesome, but kind of an unorthodox goal of stand-up. Who were some of the inspirations you had as a kid? I mean, I see Carlin and Robin Williams behind you.
Robin and Carlin. Yeah. You know what? Seinfeld was a huge influence. Cosby, who we're not supposed to talk about. Giant. I mean, my sister got one of his albums, I think by mistake for Christmas, and I immediately stole it, and I would just listen to that in my room. And then going to college, I went right at the time when like Napster and LimeWire and Kazaa. So getting to just immediately download every comedy special I ever wanted, like that was probably freshman, sophomore year of college, was just sitting on my Dell computer watching those specials, like every Premium Blend, every single Comedy Central Presents that I could get my hand on. And then I went to Indiana University, and all 4 years they brought in a comedian. And if I stood in back, I could, if I helped people find their seats at the IU auditorium, they'd let you watch the show for free in the back. And so in my 4 years there, I got to see Carlin, Cosby, Seinfeld, and Chappelle.
Oh my God. Was Mark Cuban, the great Hoosier bankrolling this? I mean, wow, that's some impressive talent.
It was pretty incredible to get to see those. So that was just getting an education. I was there for college to get a business degree, but I was just getting a comedy education. And even though I never went up in college, I always knew when this is done, I'm going out to Los Angeles just because of the weather. It was either New York or LA. And I thought, well, the weather's better in LA.
The weather is better in LA, but you're moved from Nebraska to Indiana. You're studying business, but the school happens to have 4 of the greatest comics ever. I mean, after watching them, how did that influence your comedic goals?
You know, I had that little bit of stupidity inside of me. In fact, I tried to get on before George Carlin because I was a guest usher. I knew the general manager of the auditorium, and I said, "Hey, I've been writing since junior high. Do you think I could go up before George and do 5 minutes?"
Wow.
And he goes, "What are you, out of your mind? I'm not going to let you bomb in front of 2,600 people." But at that moment, never had done comedy before. I thought, well, I'll go up and George will see me. He said, "Quit college, kid. You're coming with me. You got it.
Come on the road. We'll take you far." So that I mean, takes some balls, but also it shows the kind of irrational confidence one needs to get on stage. You know, and like without that, with it, it's hard. Without that, you're kind of dead in the water. I mean, did you always have such a hunger for the stage?
Yeah. Mom was in theater growing up, and so I would have these little parts in the community theater. And then anytime there was anything in school where there was a shred of doubt of what we were doing, I was making a student film or something and acting. Like if they gave you any leeway, if it wasn't just a straight up book report, I was doing a video.
you were doing a video. So you put this dream on your cork board. You see these comics. Did you disclose it to your parents? Like what?
Oh, they saw it.
Oh, so they saw your dream. Okay, and they.
Oh yeah, they were allowed in the room.
That? Okay.
I don't know if my dad probably just chose to ignore it because even though he's very supportive of it, he grew up in the hardworking generation. Like he built his own business, and he's the kind of guy. He ran gas stations, and he would go on Saturdays and Sundays and clean the car wash. He didn't have to clean the car wash. There was
I have some free time. I'm gonna work. Yeah,
I'm gonna go do that. And I was never that way. That gene did not get passed down into me. So I think he was always a little bit like, boy, I wish you were a harder working person or you were striving towards something else, but they've always been supportive of it. So that was cool.
Yeah. Well, you kind of throw, you're going counter to the old adage, like you need to have this miserable upbringing to be good in comedy. Like, one thing that annoys me about you, Nick, is you are nice to everyone. And I mean this in all sincerity. Like when we were coming up in the ranks, you were always cool to me. You were always cool to other people, and that it was in a time and in a scene where that was pretty rare. So, do you think your parents contributed to that, or did you just happen to be this wonderful person on your own?
Certainly they gave me my disposition, and growing up in Nebraska, you had to find your own fun. I didn't have cable, so it was always trying to find something interesting to do with my friends, things like that. And yeah, I never gravitated toward the negative side. I remember moving out to Los Angeles and just going to open mics and just sitting in the back, kind of like picking my shot.
Okay.
Because I had this dream, but it was precious.
Sure. You don't want to drop it and crack it and see it fall into the crevasse of emptiness.
If your first show is abysmal, who knows? Maybe you just say, that's it.
I got to put something else on the corkboard. So when did you actually break your comedy cherry, Nick?
Yeah. So I moved out to California June 1st. Of 2005, and I didn't get on stage until November 16th or something like that. Like it took 5 or 6 months of me just sitting in the back watching, and I would go to the Comedy Store and sit in the back, and that, as you know, at the time that was a dark.
Oh my God. Yeah, it's 180 from what it is today. I mean, this in the early 2000s, the Comedy Store was depressing.
Ooh. It was bad, and I remember going to their open mic night, and the host, who I can't remember, I can see him perfectly. I cannot remember his name. I haven't seen him in years, but he was going up in between every comic and he was just trashing them. And I remember going, oh no, if that were me, I'd be shattered right now. Like this guy's hand is stamped. I think he was probably a paid regular up there, and he was just trashing every comic. And finally, even though I was sitting in the back, finally he starts trashing somebody, and I accidentally out loud said, just go to the next guy. Because I didn't want to hear his negative, and I didn't mean to say it out loud. I think it just had spewed up out of me, and he got mad at me, and I was like, "Oh, I deserve everything I'm getting right now.
Yeah.
I should just shut my mouth." But I never liked that negative energy. I think that kills creativity. It kills people's willingness to try, and I don't like it.
Well, I'm glad you don't like it. So you're sitting in the Comedy Store. You're yelling at the host for needlessly roasting people who may have not wanted it. But when did you actually move from a spectator to a performer?
So that's one of the things about putting your goals down and then putting a long distance between your goal and actually obtaining it. Is it had been, I probably wrote that in 9th grade, and then 5 years later, I still hadn't. No, wait, 8 years later, I still hadn't gone on stage, and so it was precious, and I was just sitting in the back of these rooms and never signing my name up on the list. And finally, I got a little card in the mail for the West Los Angeles Extension, which is just this little college there in Culver City. And I just thumbed through it, and there was a stand-up comedy course. And I was like, and at the end, you had a performance. And I was like, okay, that will put something on the calendar. I have to do it. So I signed up. And really the great thing about it was it just forced you to write it. You made friends that had similar interests. So then all of a sudden we're going to open mics together, and, there's strength in numbers.
Yeah, you have this support system. So do you remember either any of your first jokes or the material you riffed on?
So early on, it was all about my fears, and being a landlocked Nebraskan coming out to California, everybody was surfing and going to the ocean, and I was terrified of sharks. So a good bulk of my early material was just based around the ocean.
So just shark bits and what, so you, after you did a few open mics or whatever, how did you feel?
I felt good. My first show ever actually was at the Otis College of Art and Design, and me and a couple of people that I signed up with were going to go do it, and then they canceled, but I still went. And the guy that was hosting it was in their cafeteria, and the guy hosting went up, and then he brought one of the other comics up, who went up and seemed like he was seasoned. He seemed good. He seemed prepared. But there's nobody else in this cafe except for the host, myself, and this other comedian. Like, kids are walking by with their backpacks, but they're not stopping. They're not watching the show. And so that guy gets off. The host comes up. He brings me up. The first comic leaves to go do another show, and the host steps outside to get a phone call. So now my first show ever, I'm standing in the cafeteria by myself, like trying to get the cook's attention between that little small window where they can kind of look out and see that you're just being stupid. And like any kid walk by, hey, what do you think about the thing with the sharks? Have you seen that girl that got her armpit off?
I'm just here for Sloppy Joe. I don't care about your bit. Yeah.
I don't care about your dreams. I'm just going to go ahead and get my B- and get out of there.
Exactly.
So, to me, that was a success because I said things out loud, and I didn't feel like I bombed because there was nobody there to bomb to.
Yeah,
so that might have been important.
If a bomb happens in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, does it make a sound, kind of thing?
No, reload.
So you do this cafeteria gig. When was it where you started kind of developing your own voice and building the confidence of a more seasoned performer?
Right. Yeah. Well, as you know, that takes time. And there are some days where I still wonder, what am I doing? I find I'm at my strongest when I'm doing, shows every single night and taking chances every single night. Because in the chances, and if you have a lack of preparation, but you're still taking the chances, that's where I've found what makes me funny. Because now I'm forced to like create it on the fly and describe, why I think it's funny and putting myself there and getting it out. That's when I found it. And I'm trying to pinpoint, it happens in flashes early on. I feel like you have these flashes of, I was really funny and I was myself, because in the beginning you're doing imitations of people. I feel like, I probably had shades of Dane Cook and Jerry Seinfeld in there. But then like sometimes you say something and you're like, that was me. That was me. I was just being me and I was funny. And
what is a topic or a bit that is just you?
So fears are me, because I have irrational fears. I'm scared of flying. I'm scared of sharks. So I was getting a gut reaction out of me, which at times, was more genuine than others when I wasn't going into a high pulse. Like, what's the deal with this? If they don't like the taste of you, why are they biting you? Yeah, am I right? But when you, telling personal stories to me was a big shift, because I was doing the shark material, I was doing the stuff, but inevitably another comedian would be on that topic, and I never felt comfortable when they would mention the same topic. If I was on another show and a comic talked about surfing or sharks, or I had this joke where the punchline had the word meth in it, and if anybody else said meth, I was a wreck in my head. Like, meth's already been used. Can't use meth.
Someone referenced meth. It's all off the table for me.
I felt like a cheese if I was going to say meth. It's like the power's already been sucked out of that word. And I can't remember where the hell I was going. What was I
Well,
talking
I just love that you said I felt like a cheese. We're talking about. I'm like, that's so wholesome, Midwestern, and adorable. We're discussing when you felt like your comedy was you versus playing a character, and you mentioned fears of sharks and flying.
Yeah. Okay. So when I quit my job in 2009 and started doing the road a lot, and when I would come back
okay,
to
pause that. Okay. What job did you have? Because that's an important transition. What were you doing before 2009?
Sure. So it's funny because do you know the comedian Matt Fulcheron?
Yeah, Full Charge.
Yeah,
He always
Full
wears a
Charge.
suit. Yeah, great dude, very funny. Yes,
So funny. And I found out this much later, but I used to work at a production company that did TV commercials and music videos, and I was just in their vault. So I was just updating their website, and if somebody needed a director's reel, I'd put that down, lay it on a DVD, and mail it out, things like that. But in doing that, I had to call this place called Lightning Video, and I would call it, and it would just be, "Hi, this is Matt from Lightning Video," and I would talk to this guy named Matt on the phone several times a week. And only later did I find out that was Matt Fulcheron, and we had talked on the phone 100 times and never known it. And so I worked there, and it was interesting because, well, the company was doing interesting things. What my job was not interesting, but it somehow felt like creative adjacent.
right. You're in the biz, sort of.
Ish.
Ish.
Yeah. People around me were doing very cool things, like Spike Jonze worked there. Like I was seeing people make things that I respected, and even though I wasn't getting involved in that in a very big degree, it was still kind of interesting, something to do during the day. And I'd go out at night, do comedy. But in 2009, I got married. Late 2008, I got married, and I was like, now's the time. Like,
you're like, I have some stability in my life. I need to pursue stand-up exclusively. You have a good one. I like that thought process.
Let's go ahead and put this marriage to the test right away. She was a teacher. She was pulling down 32 grand a year.
Oh, so you're set. You got a nest egg.
I'm flush. Yeah. Let's go ahead and take a risk here.
Roll the dice.
Quit my job and went on the road for the first time for like several months in a row.
Okay.
And when I came back, I started doing shows in Los Angeles.
So to test a marriage, you're doing stand-up, not known for being stable or lucrative, and then you're going on the road, which is also probably not great for marriages. But continue, please.
Thank God it happened early, though. It set a precedent. It's like, listen, Toots, this is how it's going to go.
Listen, hon, I'm the man. You're the one making the money, but on the credit card that you're paying, I'm going to go to some hotels. So be cool about it. Yeah.
Could never have gotten away with it this far into the marriage. It had to be early when there was still obvious signs of love. And I went out and I was doing, my act and getting stronger. And then when I came back, I kind of had a decision, and it was to either do the stuff that I had been doing on the road, which always made me feel like a fraud. If I was doing a show in Los Angeles and I'm doing this stuff that I just told 60 straight days, I felt like a liar. I felt like it was, disingenuous, and so I would find
why is that? What was disingenuous?
It was like trying to, I know that's part of the craft, is to have to like say the same thing over and over again, but it felt like I was doing these shows where other people were working on things. Like I remember very, very early on going and seeing a show at the Improv, which I thought, wow, that's where professionals are doing it. And I saw Zach Galifianakis, and he had a notebook and he was just trying things. And I thought, wow, he's taking that risk here
at the Improv of all places. Like 100 people are here.
Like, how dare he? Like, wow. And so doing this tried and true stuff, especially if it doesn't work, you feel like trash because you put so much stock in this and now it just bombed in front of 8 people. and B, even if it works, you're like, yeah, I know that works. Like, I've done it. So I'd find myself doing something stupid, like purposefully messing up a bit so that it felt on the fly or felt fresh. which to me, that was dumb. So then I made a decision that in town, unless I'm doing a showcase or something, in town, I'm only going to do new stuff. And that's when after doing that for a few months, that's when I started to do what I think is my voice on stage, because I was doing new stuff every single night and forcing, it wasn't this polished thing that just sounded right in my head. It was me in real time. I had a few punchlines for each topic, but really it was just me exploring on stage. And I think that's where you find what makes you funny, or you're like kind of forced to. You kind of, either
how can I tap dance out of this if it doesn't hit?
Yes. And it's a lot of failure. It's a lot. And I still take my lumps. To this day, I do several shows in town every week, and I still take lumps. And there's something, that's why as a comedian early on, you invite a bunch of friends to shows and then you stop.
Sure. It's like, it's mutual. They're like, we've seen your act before. You're like, I want to work on new stuff. I don't want you to see it.
LeBron only tells people about the games. He's not like, hey, come to practice. I'm going to be working on my left-handed layups.
Doing drop steps for 45 minutes.
Yeah. We're like, I don't know if LeBron's any good.
No, he sucks. His left hand isn't as strong as his right.
Exactly.
So I have a note here from our research that you were handpicked by Jeff Foxworthy and Larry the Cable Guy for the What We've Been Thinking tour. What's the story there, Nick?
Yeah, so that was a cool thing because, ever since I was little, I knew the name Jeff Foxworthy. I mean, I feel like one of the first DVDs I ever bought, which may still be right here. It's like Best of the Improv, or like Best of Evening at the Improv, and he's on there. So I had known the name Jeff Foxworthy forever. Larry the Cable Guy kind of hit when I was in college, and I knew about the Blue Collar Comedy Tour, and so I'd been exposed to him, but he wasn't like this name that always was with me. Like Foxworthy always seems to be there. So through my manager, I'm pitching a show for their SiriusXM channel. They had their own channel called Jeff and Larry's Comedy Roundup. They were looking for programming for it, just like weekly shows. And I put together a couple ideas, and I was pitching it to the gal that runs their channel. And it was at the exact same time that they were putting this tour together. So it was like 2015, and they're putting this big, like 75 city tour together. And my manager goes, hey, by the way, do they need an opener? And they had a couple guys scheduled for, this guy's going to do 8 shows. This guy's going to do 20. And they go, yeah, Nick can do a couple. And so they booked me for 2 shows. And it was kind of in the middle. And then whoever was supposed to do the first 2 shows of the tour couldn't do it. And so they said, okay, Nick can do those 2 as well. And I went and I did those 2 shows. And after those 2, they go, he's the guy. And I got to do the whole 75 city tour with them.
Wow.
So it went from just being like 2 shows to 4 shows. And to be quite honest, the first show I thought wasn't great.
You're like, they're not going to let me finish this set.
I really Foxworthy's in the wings. He's watching. I thought, okay, I got 7 to 10 minutes. I'm going to go out there. I'm just going to do the hits. I'm going to crush and get out of here. And
they'll be eating out of the palms of my hand.
They'll benefit from what George Carlin couldn't see. And the very first show, we were doing 2 in Kansas City. And the very first one it was like a C minus. And I realized in between shows, these people are not expecting me.
Right.
They had no idea. The ticket says Foxworthy Cable Guy. It doesn't say Nick Hoff on there.
They're getting their popcorn and checking their phone at this time.
Yeah. Who is this? Is this the, manager of the place? Is he just coming out to tell us to shut up?
Yeah.
And in between shows, I realized that. And on that second show, the first thing out of my mouth was, who the hell am I? Right. And immediately said what everybody was thinking. It cut the tension. It got a laugh, and it let them know I'm funny. I'm self-deprecating. And then I was allowed to do my act. Whereas the first show I went out, I'm like, here's the deal with the thing in the here. And they, were caught off guard. And so had I not made that adjustment, those first 2 shows may not have gone well. And in fact, they might have gotten rid of my middle dates.
I might have had a chance. So I'm so glad you did that well.
So getting to know those guys and going on tour with them, that was huge and just an amazing experience.
And how did it compare? Because you mentioned the Melrose Improv. That's a well-regarded, well-known club. It seats maybe 100.
Yeah, it probably seats 230. Don't you think?
Is it? I'm not sure. Well, it's fairly small, and in terms of like what you were doing, what was that like? Just from like a culture shock perspective, like doing an open mic or doing the belly room to wherever you guys were.
Right. The first arena was wild. The first time, first several were theaters that were manageable, and yeah, there's a little bit difference in timing because the back row is 100 yards away from you or whatever it is, so you got to work on the timing a little bit. And I got in a weird habit of like yelling a lot, and like my energy would go up to reach that back row.
They're like, we have amplification. You don't need to shout, son. Yeah.
So often, and it still gets me in trouble sometimes, especially when I do like a really small place and I get loud because it's just awkward. But like I loved it when I could drop the microphone and yell something out from a stage and hit the back row. And but the first time we ever did an arena, that was wild because it was completely different. People are kind of up in the rafters around you. There's 7,000 people out there. And the first time you hear that laugh, it's like, I felt like, what's the scene in The Lion King, the cartoon one, where all the things are rushing at Simba and his ears like duck down. You know what I mean? It felt like that. Like the first laugh I heard that came out of that, it's just like almost scared me, like a tail between my legs moment.
Do you mean it? Yeah.
But then you get addicted to it. Then it's like heroin. You're like, oh, you're just chasing that first one.
Yeah. So how can you then go back to normal rooms? Like what was that adjustment when the theaters ended?
Right. Yeah. It's a pacing alteration, but it's not that big a deal because it's always, even in the biggest rooms, it felt almost more like one big person. So it was never overwhelming that there were that many people, but coming and doing the smaller rooms, it made me feel even more like, well, take these risks, do the jokes you want to try and do that here rather than putting them out there in front of a bunch of people that paid a lot of money to see the show, So it almost like gave me an excuse or gave me a reason to be more creative and take more chances on stage.
Right. It kind of cuts the training wheels, so to speak. Like you can kind of let it rip out there.
Dad's let go of the seat. You're on your own.
It's like, keep pedaling, look straight.
If you're going to do the no hands, like the first time you try no hands, you just like letting go for just a second and then you get cocky and you take a couple tumbles, but
you'll have some surgeries, but you learn from it.
Yeah.
Speaking of learning, what did you glean from working with Larry the Cable Guy and Foxworthy?
Yeah. So they each have a very different skill set. Larry is a one-liner guy. Which I am not. I'm more of a storyteller like Jeff. And so his like way of writing, like somebody could say something funny and Larry would say it 3 more times, each time a different way, but each time like figuring out where the emphasis was, but like fast. Like I would say a joke, and if I were writing a joke, I'd say it and then I'd sit there and I'd think for 30 seconds to a minute and say, oh, what about, what if I did this or tried it this way? He's like 3 straight times, almost with no pause in between the sentences. You just see how his brain's working. And so his punchlines are always written the exact right way. Anytime I'm looking for like a very punchy punchline at the end of something, he knows exactly how to do it. And he's an absolute beast at writing it. Like he's got, these Word documents just with things and he's constantly tweeting out. So from a joke writing perspective, that was cool to see. Jeff, he had some interesting things. And one time he came with a whole new 7 minutes and it was all typed out, written completely. And he was just doing it in the car on the way to the thing. And I watched how he could edit on the fly and make that work. So just seeing that they're still working on their stuff and going up every single time. One interesting thing that Jeff told me, one time we did a comedy in the round where the stage is in the middle and there's 360 audience around you. Okay. And he's a technical guy. He can like figure out the way to work a stage. And the 2 things he told me, he's like, never give a setup to one side and the punchline to the other. if you're doing a setup to them, tell them the punchline. Because these people back here have sort of tuned you out, or they're not 100% focused.
Wow.
And if you turn your back on the people that are focused, these people aren't going to give you the laugh you want. And now all of a sudden, these people now, you've turned your back on them for the funny. So he's like, just do it here and then turn and then do the next bit here. And he also said, make the stage a square and just walk that square so you're not neglecting anybody.
So insightful.
Right? I never would have thought of that myself. But yeah, I just, was just walking a square so that I never just like, oh, for 25 minutes, you had your back to these people. Right. And you're only facing them for 5. So he's pretty smart that way. He's
very thoughtful. Yeah. In researching Greg Giraldo, a comedian story, if you guys haven't bought it, please do so. But one of Giraldo's more famous roast lines was to Larry the Cable Guy when he just kind of loses and goes, "Why are you so popular?" and it wasn't written in advance. It was just an honest kind of exalt. And it kind of said a lot because on one hand, Giraldo was such a comics comic, very well respected, very New York. In many aspects, Larry the Cable Guy, and I know that's a stage name, it was kind of the opposite. At least the perception was that. But what I learned is he loved getting roasted by Giraldo. They probably had a lot more in common. But it was a time, Nick, where it was like really cool to hate on Larry the Cable Guy. Especially for like comics. What was your take on all that?
So yeah, it was interesting because I wasn't super familiar. Obviously, I knew who he was and had heard some of his stuff. But getting to work with them, I wasn't super familiar, and I knew there was a stigma that comes with that type of comedy. And the truth is, when you run into people that, you think of as hoity-toity, like, I've heard Larry Dan talk about the roast, and he and Giraldo were like palling around behind the scenes. He's like, "Hey man, sorry, like whatever." And there is a little bit of disdain for somebody that's, doing something that you're doing and they have this enormous amount of success, right?
Right.
Because Giraldo was, funnier than anybody. Yet he's not doing the arenas. And I'm sure there was a part of him that was like, son of a bitch. Like, why can't I?
Yeah. Why are you so popular? Like,
why are you so popular? and, you try and crack the nut, you try and figure it out. And so it was fun for me because I'm not necessarily a blue collar act. I talk about my family and stuff. I'm not going to go crazy or anything, but I kind of liked having those different audiences. I do a couple of jokes when I would open for the guys that just kind of made everybody in there a little uncomfortable. I had a gun control joke that I loved seeing people. Hey. And people would like
tread lightly, California boy.
And I love doing it because I'm not the I live out here. I love people out here. I grew up in Nebraska. I love people from Nebraska. I see all different sides. I don't get caught up in the politics, but I love making somebody uncomfortable and then still making them laugh. So going out there in front of their crowds, that was fun. And they've got great, fans. The fans just want to see them. They're just a fan of laughter. And so I think anybody that's into that can see, the value in somebody like Larry, just an absolute beast of a joke maker, even if it's 75% farts.
Hey, farts can be funny. So in your opinion, Nick, why is Larry the Cable Guy so popular? Can you answer? Geraldo's watching this from heaven right now. So
all right, Greg, thanks for the kinds of things you said to me when I auditioned for Last Comic Standing. Even though I didn't make it on the show, you were very nice. Two things. One is he's a great joke writer, and people identify with all kinds of humor, right? Like in the age of the internet and television, you only have to get a small fraction of the audience, and that's still an enormous amount of people. Like even if only 1% of people love your stuff, in America alone, that's like 33 million people. If you get 1%.
I think 10%. I think that would be 3 million.
You still get 3 million people. If you have 3 million diehard fans in just America, you make a great living. And so there's that. And then a lot of people that don't know this about him was he was making phone calls to radio stations 5 days a week. He would call like 12 different radio stations. He did that for 13 years, doing that Larry the Cable Guy character and writing a different thing every single day about, you know, just things that were happening in the world. And so he did that for 13 years. People think, oh, he was an overnight success or whatever, but he was doing that hard work, calling that many radio stations every single day for 13 years, building his fan base. And then he was, you know, he knew exactly how to write for his character at the exact moment that blue collar comedy tour brought him on. He wasn't the original fourth member. They had done a handful of shows before him. They brought him on and he just, you know, escalated, and then he got in the Cars movies. So I think it was the hard work met opportunity and just finding his audience.
Very John Wooden of him. So now you've
wait, hold on. I don't understand that reference.
No,
that was his
Wooden,
quote.
No, John Wooden is the
coach,
legendary
for
UCLA basketball coach. And
yeah,
there's a quote. He either said it or it's ascribed to him, where he said, "Success is where hard work and opportunity meet." So it kind of plays.
He said it better than me, but
maybe. But you know, he
was older.
He rushed, but don't hurry, Nick Hoff.
Okay.
So you know, we started comedy around the same time, and I'd like to get your opinion on what is most different now versus, call it, the early aughts, like early 2000s.
In comedy, or just for me?
Well, probably in comedy, or however you want to answer it. I know you're more married now and more fathered and stuff, but however you want to.
Well, I no longer get to do your shows in that
that's true.
That upper deck of that place on Sunset.
Red Rock. Yeah, it's now
Red
called
Rock.
State Street Ale House or State Street Ale House or something. But so that's a big one. Yeah,
that was a great show.
It was.
It used to run, and I feel like you left right about the time that you were writing your book. Is that correct?
A few years before. Yeah, I left right around the time I was finally a paid regular, getting $12 a spot at Melrose because
making that.
My wife had a job in Palo Alto, so I dutifully followed her.
Look at you! Look at you! You didn't marry a teacher.
She was getting medical training, and I was getting $12 a show. So you know, we went with the more lucrative option. But
there you go.
I mean, one difference I remember from that time is like not everything was. Even it seems like now everything's recorded, even though it's not. It's like there's more audience that wasn't even at the show, so it seems like you have more critics and just more like scuttlebutt, for lack of a better word. You know, like back then it seemed more of a speakeasy where you can go to Red Rock and just kind of, you know, purposely say something that's edgy, or maybe you don't totally believe it, but it had a little bit of like naughtiness. Now it appears it's a little bit safer. I don't know if that's true. I'm just saying that's a difference I perceive from then and now.
You think now it's safer?
No. Well, I think no. I think now it's harder to do like kind of more, for lack of a better word, like naughty or you know, just kind of taboo subject. I think now you're skewered more for stuff that you're just kind of messing around with. Like I think it's taken the audience that was maybe, you know, the 20 people at a Red Rock, and now it's like, and I don't think it's as bad as people may claim, but it's like I could say a joke and then someone can then quickly say, "Oh, Matt hates all people of this origin," or something. You know, it's like very quickly snowballs, and then you're like, "Do I want to defend it?" Where back then it's like, "Dude, it's just a joke. No one really cared." It seemed like it lived and died on stage. Now there's this kind of online conversation that, in my opinion, too many people have about what should be just kind of a funny line or two.
Yeah, it's hard because things are, like you said, everything's recorded nowadays. Not only by, you know, like an audience member might take out their phone and like videotape something, and not necessarily to catch you in something, but just for fun. I record all my shows now with a video camera just in case. You know, something is great that happens. You know, maybe I get stabbed and I got all this great content.
Someone punches you and you're like, "Oh, I can get a few more likes."
Thank God. It feels a little bit more like high wire act. I even have written in my notebook, I was trying to write a joke about transgender. And because, you know, I've got thoughts on it, but also I don't want to put them up there unformed. Where normally if I've got a joke about, diapers or something like that,
you're not second guessing yourself. Yeah, you're not
step
worried
on any toes out there.
It's
Like, it doesn't have to be airtight. I can
he's a
explore it.
diaper-phobe, that Nick Hoff. He doesn't.
But I don't want to think out loud in front of people, because people aren't going to give you the benefit of the doubt anymore. People, especially in like out of content text circumstances. Like, I just put a special out on YouTube, Nick Hoff front to back. You can check that out. And the very first part, where I recorded it, was in July of 2021, and I had been developing that material for the years leading up to COVID, and then even a little bit in COVID. So it starts out with a COVID joke, and you would not believe how many people comment like, "Oh, pushing the vaccine." Like, first of all, shut up. This was a year ago, and secondly, shut up anyway. I'm telling jokes.
Right.
Like, don't take that one thing and then like assume. And I called one guy out who was ripping on my thing. He's like, 30 minutes in, all he's doing is low hanging fruit of this and this. And I responded to him with, I think I said, can't wait to hear your review of the second half.
Yeah.
And
Thanks
he
for
actually
paying attention. Yeah.
Right. He actually wrote back, and, credit to him. He's like, I'm sorry, I was in a bad mood. And I did like this joke and the rest of it. And I just think if you took a couple more risks, you could be unstoppable. Like,
wow, you got some constructive notes versus just like crapping on you.
So, out of context and things like that, people don't want to allow people to grow and learn anymore, because you get so embedded. And I do it too. I get so embedded in my belief about something that just hearing a buzzword or a trigger word of something brings up all of this baggage that I have. And now I push that all up against this one little thing you said, and I refuse to move. And it's really hard, especially then, to disarm that and get people to laugh.
Yeah. What are some of these triggers? Like what is something that kind of makes it harder for you to appreciate a joke, whether you're watching it or crafting it yourself?
There are little things that people hear, and it's usually people being shocked or appalled on other people's behalf, which, that's my sister. That's my older sister. She has so much empathy. Like, her heart is in the right place, that she's gone way too far. She's gone way too far. I'll give you an example. One of our kids, and I don't know if I should tell her. I already said it's my older sister. I love her to death. It
may or may not be his older sister.
It's somebody's older sister that I met one time.
It's my older sister.
Yeah.
We'll tweak it to protect the innocent.
Ish. She's got these very, like, towards Native Americans, like, her kids are all in school. And I think one of their school projects was making a Native American headdress, like one of those. And she didn't want him to do it. She's like, this is insensitive. Okay. And her heart is absolutely in the right place. Don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, make them feel like we're making fun of anybody. 100%.
So having a first grader, cowboy hat, boy. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Having a first grader do that. Do I think that this is, a horrible thing where, come on, get out of town.
Yeah.
That's where society has gone. We're a clickbait nation where we just want to just look at the headline, not do our own research, and then form an opinion about it. So, and one that preferably, fits in line with the rest of our opinions. And it's really hard to make a joke when people have those walls up.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
It's really hard. Like, I had a joke that I believe was on my CD Baby Daddy that was about domestic violence. And maybe you shouldn't make light of domestic violence, but I have had multiple people come up to me after a show, tell me that that's bullshit, that I shouldn't be saying that, and what a horrible thing for me to joke about. And then I've had women come up to me who have been in battered shelters that are like, thank you for standing up for us.
Right.
Thank you for giving us a voice and showing how ridiculous it is. So I don't know. You can't win them all.
You can't please everyone, Nick Hoff. So we're wrapping up, but I want to know what's on your dream board now. What's the next goal you have?
The camera might just be out of reach here, and right here are my yearly goals. And so up there, I'll put it out there. I've put it out there multiple times. I want to do the Tonight Show really, really bad. There's something about doing late night that gets your hands stamped. It's, it's a rite of passage. Did you ever do late night?
I did a skit on Conan, so I'll use it as a credit, but it wasn't stand-up, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, you get to be on there and do that. And I know that it doesn't mean what it used to mean.
Sure.
But I just feel like the Tonight Show audience just is in line with what I do. And I really want to do late night and get that going. So, I still put my goals down. I still try and achieve them. I've got other things on there. Like I've got a script that I'm writing. I'm trying to sell, trying to get my YouTube channel up to over 10,000, like things like that. Just achievable goals that at the end of the year, it's pretty easy to go over it and say, where did I screw up?
Well, at least you wrote them down. So you have a measuring stick. And what are you most optimistic about going forward, Nick?
Most optimistic about going forward. I love creating new material and new jokes. So getting out the special kind of turns the back on that. And it's interesting you asked that question because I go back and forth. I'm at my new materials at this stage right now where one night I'm all about it. One night I think, record this now.
Here. Yeah, it's gold.
It's ready. Call HBO. And then the next night I go, what am I even doing? It's at that horrible growth stage where I haven't really figured it out. And it's this awful thing that is coming. It's coming. When you're doing new stuff, it's going to go through these peaks and valleys. And I think you have to go through it 3 times. I think building a new act, I think you go through it 3 times. I'm a firm believer that an hour takes 3 years to achieve. Mm-hmm. I don't think anybody's proven me wrong yet in putting a golden hour together in under 3 years. Louis was cranking them out every year, but if you ask me, he could have waited. And he's one of the best ever. Bill Burr's one of the best ever. I love their stuff, but I watch it and I go, boy, 20 minutes was better than the other 40 in there. So I know there's going to be 3 valleys. So right before you called, I was actually looking at my set list for my show I have tomorrow. And I was going, I was feeling kind of crappy about it. I was feeling pretty down, Maddie. But I know, you got to go out and take your lumps. You got to learn it. And so to me, the fact that I forget who said it, it wasn't John Wooden, but somebody said, time moves on. Like as bad as this will be.
Maybe it was John Lennon. It sounds very prophetic.
maybe. And then he got stabbed and time stopped moving. So it will eventually get where you need to be. If you got your goals in front of you and you're working on it, even if you don't see it today, I'm encouraged by the fact that eventually we'll get there.
Eventually we'll get there and we'll all be dead, so it won't matter either way. But in the meantime,
but before you die, subscribe to this podcast and give it a 5-star rating.
Exactly. So we're wrapping up, but where can people learn more about you, your work? They might have a lot of money they just need to get rid of. How can they do that, Nick Hoff?
Yeah. If you got some leftover cash, I'll recycle that for you. Come find me on YouTube and watch some of my stuff. And if you like it, then just check out my tour dates. I'm all over the place, nickhoff.com. I've got a podcast called the Hoffcast. Would love to have you on. And that way we can find out more about you. I feel like
sounds good.
I feel like
we'll do a double date. Yeah.
I love it.
Well, check him out. He's wonderful. He's one of the few people on earth who can pull off a mustache and look good doing it. So Nick Hoff, God bless you. Thank you for coming on the program. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Matt Balaker podcast. To learn more, please check out mattbalaker.com and encourage your friends to like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate it.